Hjärtligt välkomna till Navigera och vår presentation av Millennials-strategin från Goldman Sachs. Vi har ett strategiskt samarbete med Goldman Sachs sedan ungefär ett år tillbaka. En av världens största förvaltare, mycket stor organisation, 2500 miljarder under förvaltning. Men också en mycket innovativ förvaltare som vi får höra mer om. Laura som relativt ung och nyanställd gick själv upp till ledningen i New York och presenterade den här idén som vi kommer få höra. Laura är idag en av 3 förvaltare i Millennials-fonden hos Goldman Sachs. The stage is yours, Laura.
Great.
Welcome to Stockholm.
Thank you so much. Great, thanks so much. It's great to be here. Really appreciate the time and everyone's attention. It's my first trip to Stockholm. Actually, I was hoping to come sooner, but COVID got slightly in the way. But so we're very happy to be here now. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about the portfolio. So maybe I'll start by making just 3 key points. So we've been running the strategy at Goldman Sachs Asset Management since 2016. So we've been running it for a while. And the impetus for launching the fund back then was that we believed that millennials were on the cusp of becoming the world's most powerful consumer cohorts, that they behaved differently, they had different priorities, and that as a result, that was going to drive a significant amount of disruption across the marketplace. And that by having a dedicated investment strategy, where we would be focused on identifying the beneficiaries of some of that disruption, that we would have the opportunity to create a lot of value for our clients over the long term. So maybe we'll start with who are millennials. Let's just make sure we're all on the same page. So millennials are the generation of individuals born between 1980 and the year 2000. I'm sure there's some millennials in the room today. And so why did we decide to focus on them? So the first point I'd make is that there are a lot of millennials worldwide. So there are 2.3 billion millennials worldwide, which you can see on the screen, as opposed to 1.2 baby boomers, just as a point of comparison. Now, because millennials were so numerous, as they were entering the workplace, starting to climb up the corporate ladder and finally earn some income, they were in aggregate starting to earn more income than any other demographic cohort. Again, because they're so numerous. So not making the point that per capita they were necessarily in a better position than others, but because they were so numerous in aggregate, they were going to be controlling an increasingly proportion of global wealth and therefore consumer spending. On top of that, because of where they were in terms of, again, their age, they were spending more and more as they were earning more, whereas other demographic cohorts actually in aggregate were starting to spend a little bit less. The declining line for baby boomers is nothing negative. It's that after a lot of years of working very hard, they're finally able to retire. So of course their income starts to become negative when they by choice choose to leave the workforce. But now if millennials behaved in the same way as all other demographic cohorts, building the strategy wouldn't make a ton of sense, right? So actually we do believe that millennials behave differently, and this is just meant to be a fun anecdote representing how some things have changed over the years. But if we take now a few more tangible examples, millennials are the first generation of what we call digital natives. So we've grown up with constant access to our mobile phones, and therefore we're constantly connected. The slide on the left-hand side of the page is just meant to show how the pace of innovation has accelerated over time. What this does is it looks at major innovations that have happened through history, and the time that it took for those innovations to scale, meaning how long it took in this instance for that innovation to reach 50 million people. So if you think back to when the car was first invented, actually it took 62 years from the time that the car was invented for 50 million people to get access to a car, which seems surreal to us today because of course it's very easy today to get access to a car. Although you may not want to own one, you may prefer to just share one. And as we think about innovation in the digital world, a lot of these digital business models have this advantage that they scale incredibly rapidly. So if you think about social media companies, for instance, they scaled in a matter of single-digit years, the fastest of which was WeChat in China, which reached 50 million users in a year. And if you think now of businesses like Facebook, you have more users of Facebook than the population of any one country in existence in the world today. And then we put Pokemon Go on here, not trying to at all make the claim that Pokemon Go is a life-changing innovation, but just simply making the humoristic example that, of course, that innovation went viral and reached 50 million people in just 19 days, and we're talking about a simple video game here. The other point that we'd make is that new business models have been created over this period of time too. If we think back to the 2008 global crisis, which is the most recent that we've been faced with the exception of COVID, which we'll come back to, consumers tend to innovate out of necessity. And so tougher economic times also gives rise to new business models that we can't imagine yet today. So if we think at companies such as Airbnb, Uber, which are multi-billion-dollar conglomerates today, they were actually conceived in 2009 on the back of the global financial crisis. As it became tougher for consumers during that period of time to actually own goods, they found a way to get access to them without having to take on the burden of ownership. The other point I'd make is that consumers also have different lifestyle and values because they're the product of the environment in which they've come of age. So in the case of millennials, things that we've been focused on are different approaches to health and wellness, a greater focus on sustainable living, so approach to the way that our consumer choices impacts the planet that we live on, and prioritizing, so I said experiences, no, I didn't say experiences, and prioritizing experiences over simply consuming material goods. So why does this matter? I think we've seen, across the industry, huge growth of passive investing. And of course, we have nothing against passive investing, certainly has a role to play in some client portfolios. But by definition, the way that those vehicles work is you own the world's largest companies in size. They're all market cap weighted. And so what that naturally means is that you own today yesterday's winners. You don't necessarily own today tomorrow's winners. And so what we want to try to do is obviously identify, thinking through this lens of consumerism, which are going to be the leaders of tomorrow and own them today and hopefully own them for the long run. And this is, I think, a helpful illustration because if you look at 20 years ago, these were the lists of companies that were the world's largest companies by market cap. If you look at that same list now, there's only one company actually that is still on the list. And it's Microsoft, which has been able to completely reinvent itself. So the composition looks very different. Of course, highly exposed today to tech companies and consumer-oriented internet companies, but we think that this list is likely to look very different 20 years from now. So doing the work today to understand what that might look like. Hopefully we own a few of those in the portfolio, and if that's the case and we've been able to identify those nuggets, then investors, our clients, will do very, very well in the long run. So this slide represents the sub-themes that the strategy is invested in at the moment. So, I tried to explain when we were thinking about the opportunity sets of these two different verticals of the way in which consumers choose to consume goods, which is evolving, which is what we call tech-enabled consumption, crudely. And then the other part, which is more, okay, what are they going to spend that money on in terms of what are they buying and how are those behaviors changing? The two sides of the portfolio are also quite complementary to each other because they're going to have different behavioral exposures. They also do well in different types of market environments. And certainly we can reflect on the last 3 years of the impact that the COVID pandemic has had on many of the companies that we've invested in. With, of course, the tech-enabled side of the equation, as you can imagine, doing incredibly well during that time, as not just millennials, but all consumer cohorts have had to rely more on digital means of consumption over that period. And certain parts of lifestyle and values that actually face some real challenges as a result of the pandemic. Spending on experiences clearly was something that people wanted to do but couldn't do for a period of time. And so we took some action at the portfolio to manage that. But hopefully this gives you a good sense.
Thank you very much, Laura.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.